My name's Joni Cranston and I'm a physiotherapist. I live and work in Norris Point at the Old Cottage Hospital.
Could you tell us when you moved here to Norris Point and what brought you to the area?
I first came to Norris Point I came in November 1987. They weren't actually looking for a physiotherapist at the time, but I just had a new baby and I was looking for a safe community to raise my child on my own. So I walked in through the lower door at the Old Cottage Hospital into the outpatient department where all the people were sitting in the chairs lined up waiting to see the doctor. And someone came and took the baby from my arms and said, "Go on upstairs and talk to Mita." She was the administrator at the time.
So tell us a little bit about that, about when you started and what a typical day looked like working there.
When I used to walk into work, I used to think I'd died and gone to heaven because I'd worked in large hospitals in Montreal and in Ontario and in Grand Falls is where I'd come from. And just to walk into this little hospital, you'd walk in the side door, the emergency door. You'd walk past the kitchen where you could smell all the delicious homemade meals that they were making every day. Past the dining room where maybe the doctors were sitting having the full English breakfast, having their morning rounds, talking about the patients and their care. And then walk past the women's ward on one side and the men's ward on the other. They were long-term care wards at the time. And so you'd hear the sounds of the nurses, talking to the patients as they got them ready for the day. People laughing, talking, chatting. Then I'd walk past the nursing station and the head nurse was sitting there. And she was always just so calm and serene and everything was going to be fine as long as Karen was in the nursing station. And then I'd walk down the hall to the old operating room, and that still has the sign on it now that says Physiotherapy Department. And it really was a team approach there at the Cottage Hospital. There wasn't this hierarchy that exists now. In the dining room, the administrator would sit down for lunch with the janitor, same as with the doctor. Everybody pitched in and did what they could. I remember one time looking for the housekeeper to mop the floor. Couldn't find her. I went into the ward. She was sitting beside an older patient who needed some comfort, talking and singing to her and reading from the Bible. So it's like, okay, I'll mop the floor. Everybody really pitched in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was a little bit of a community of its own. So what would a typical day working there look like?
I think the thing about it, the feeling was that it was one family, the team, looking after the community, looking after their community. They weren't caring for random patients. They were caring for their relatives, for their parents, for their friends, for their family. They were caring for their community. And that was really the feel of the place. Yeah.
So how did you feel when you heard this building, that you felt like you were a part of this family, when you heard this building was going to close?
It was devastating, not only for me, but for everyone. In one of the budget shortfalls, they said that they needed to save a certain amount of money, and in order to save this amount of money, they would close this hospital. And everyone was just shocked and devastated because the hospital was center to the community. You take away the hospital, the community, would lose its heart. And also, it was essential for saving lives. We're far away from Cornerbrook over Southeast Hills in the winter. And so if that was gone, it would cost lives. So it just didn't make sense. And I think the other thing that really drew all the communities together, all around the bay, everybody rallied together, was because the Cottage Hospital had been built by the community. The Commission of Government established the Cottage Hospital system as a way to provide health care to rural areas. And if an area wanted a hospital, they would apply to the government, and the government would supply the nails and the salary of a foreman. The communities had to supply everything else. So the men cut all the lumber and hauled the logs over the ice with their oxen and brought the lumber to the site. And the men provided the labor. And people would even walk from Rocky Harbour over to work at the Cottage Hospital in the morning, walk home at night, and then walk back in the evening for a dance because the girls in Norris Point were prettier. and the men from Woody Point would row across the bay, and the men from Trout River couldn't go back and forth in one day, so they actually slept in the foundations of the hospital while it was being built, while they were coming to do their hours. The men built it and constructed it, the women painted it. It officially opened in 1939. The first doctor was Dr. Dove, and initially all the staff lived upstairs in the staff quarter. They worked 6.5 days a week. It was their home. And it was an incredible opportunity for young girls in the community. I know so many women who, someone would talk to them, just out of school and say, why don't you come and work at the cottage hospital in the kitchen? Then they might progress to be an aide or anything, right? But they all lived there 6.5 days a week, and it was their home. And on their half day off, they would go out into the community and try and meet a man. This one young woman had come from Woody Point and was living upstairs, and the man she was courting used to throw a piece of coal up against the window to let her know that he was downstairs. So they would roll up the bedclothes and make it look like they were in the bed, because matron, of course, was in the apartment on that floor, and she would come round to check to make sure they were in their bed. So they'd roll up the bedclothes to make it look like they were there. He would throw the coal. She would sneak down over the stairs down to the furnace room, and Martin Bugden, the caretaker at the time, allowed them to meet down in the furnace room to court. And she did end up marrying that man and living in the community for many years. So yeah, that's why it really mattered, because it was our building. It had been built by the community, and so for someone to try and take it away, that really ignited people's passion. Mm-hmm. So when we heard it was going to close, the staff, we got together, I remember, down in the medical records department, and we talked about how this can't happen. So we said, what can we do? And we decided to hold a community meeting, and there was a community meeting held in the town hall, over 200 people in attendance. And out of that meeting, it was determined that we were not going to lose this hospital. So the next step was to invite our MLA, Chuck Fury, to come and meet with us. There was 30 of us in the room, and we all just very respectfully gave him our case as to why it could not close. So he came out of the meeting and he said to me after, I thought I would go in there and be crucified, and I walked into a room and 30 people gave me 30 reasons why not to close this. But they did recognize that we needed a more modern, upgraded medical facility. So instead of saving $1 million by closing the old hospital, they invested $8 million in the new hospital, which now serves the community. The new Bonne Bay Health Centre now serves the community. At that moment, a group of us got together, those of us who truly loved that building, and said, what will happen to this building? We have to save it. It was built by the community, it was built for the community, and we have to preserve it for the community. The new hospital was built, and the old hospital closed its doors for the first time since opening them when it was constructed in December 2001. And that was a heartbreaking day. I cried to break my heart. And everybody just went on up. There was some pictures taken, but everybody just went on up to the new hospital and just left it. So at a certain point, by 2005, the government very kindly kept the heat on to keep it going. And then we said, we'll use it as is, where is. We're not going to change anything. We're just going to adaptively reuse it. That was the concept. So the medical records department, the public library, was looking for a home. We put the public library in the medical records department. On the main floor, we created the studio room that exists for so many purposes. We cleaned up some of the small rooms on the side for offices. The ward rooms, one of them, the women's ward, we turned into a hostel ward. We put the hospital beds back there. And the men's ward, we used that. We just said, everything that we find of value, we'll put in there. And that became the museum room. So that was full of all kinds of treasures just gathered from every corner of the building as they cleaned it. And the top floor, where originally the hospital staff used to live, that had been turned into offices, but we just turned those offices back into bedrooms. So it became a small little hostel space, a lovely little space. And the hostel was actually, we had no money then to operate, and the hostel actually became our first source of revenue generation, and it sustained us through many, many years. So we got the funds to clean up the building. It was all clean, ready to go, but we had no operating funds. So we sent out letters to everyone we could think of in the community, asking for donations to help get it going. And one family stepped up to the plate, the family of Julia Ann Walsh. One of the daughters, she gave us a donation of $50,000 in exchange for naming the building after her mother, which was perfect because her mother was the epitome of Newfoundland women. She raised 9 children on her own, and she'd be out fixing her step in the morning, and someone would walk by from the ferry on the way to the hospital, and she would say, are you going to the hospital? Yes. Do you need something to eat? Well, stop by on your way back. And the children would go, Mom, we don't have food. Yes, we have food. We can feed everyone.
So this is what it's called now, because a lot of us still call it the Old Cottage Hospital, but it's actually called
It is the Julia Ann Walsh Centre officially, and I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to tell this story.
What is in the Julia Ann Walsh Centre today? What is there right now?
So initially we had things like the hostel and the library and small health-related businesses. But over time, things evolved and got added in. We had created space for festivals. We were the first home of the Trails, Tales and Tunes Festival. We're very proud of that. That started in 2007. In 2008, a community radio station, a kind of pop-up festival radio station popped up to cover the Trails, Tales and Tunes Festival, and that operated for a couple of years until it was determined that there was a need and desire for a permanent community radio station in Norris Point. And that's when VOBB was established. Where to put it? Well, there was the original doctor's office had turned into a storage room. We cleaned that up, and that's the home of the Voice of Bonne Bay community radio station, which is such an incredible resource for the community, and it reflects the voices of the community back. It's actually the voice of Bonne Bay that really helped the community to buy into what we were doing with the Cottage Hospital, because they all thought we were nuts. They thought we were crazy. What do you want to keep that old building for? But in the Trails, Tales and Tunes Festival in 2008, we had the studio room with the couches and the radio station there. We invited the community in to talk. And when the community could listen to the radio during the festival and hear their own voices reflected back to them, telling their own stories, that's when they go, oh, that's what the Cottage Hospital is. It's for us. It's our building. It's still open. We can still access it. And then they started coming in. The quilters used the studio room. And we started running exercise programs there. We started having concerts there, so anything to do to bring the community back into the building. And then COVID. So we've had to shift a little bit since COVID because the hostel was no longer, we weren't able to bring people from even outside the province initially, and certainly not from outside the country and not from the rest of Canada. So we've shifted the use of the hostel. The space still exists, but instead of having random strangers walk in, it has to be booked ahead by groups of people. But we needed to branch out into new directions. And before the pandemic, we'd been working with a community group who wanted to establish a daycare. So we are working with them to do all the work to secure the funding for the daycare. And that will be a little project that we've incubated that will go on its own, right? Yeah.
So there's still very much a future vision for the Old Cottage Hospital. So besides the daycare, is there anything else you see on the horizon for this building?
I think the daycare will be one of the main things, because then I see it's not just a daycare, it'll become a family center, because we'll have to shift the lobby, so we'll have like a little coffee place where the parents can come and get a cup of coffee and, chat with each other and socialize while they're waiting for their children, so that will bring parents into the building. And we have the community gardens and greenhouse that's used by the farmer, and she now has using the old food storage room as her nursery for her plants. So again, using as is, where is, and adaptive reuse. So as a sort of local food center with the community kitchens and the farmer using the gardens, a family center. I'd really like to see more of the craft development happening, like the studio space being used for craft workshops, as well as expanding our concert series, so really being able to promote that culture. And then the dearest part of it to me is the heritage, and the museum room has finally come into its own, but there's so much more work that could be done there. We're actually a social enterprise incubator hub. because we operate as a social enterprise, generating our own funds to sustain our operations, and we've incubated so many things. The radio station was like our child that we incubated, and it's still a teenager living in the basement. But they're becoming very self-sufficient. The radio station is an incredible partner, again, because that gets our voices out all over the world. And I think the main vision for the future is that by 2039, on the 100th anniversary of the opening of the Cottage Hospital, it will be a self-sustaining, financially and human resource-wise, energy-efficient community centre that's there to serve the community into the future as it has in the past.